So the Las Vegas Raiders have went out there and signed safety Terrell Edmunds, and I want to talk about why they brought this guy in because truth be told, watching the tape of the Las Vegas Raiders, safety specifically against the Seattle Seahawks, I'm not shocked that the Raiders made this move. Last week, the Raiders had brought in Terrell Edmunds on a visit. They had the game against the Seahawks, and this week they brought him in and officially signed him. And he's practicing now with the Raiders, right? Or at least he will tomorrow practice with the Raiders. This is a guy who's a former first-round pick. He's going into his 8th season. He has like 7 interceptions, 8 sacks, 500 tackles over the course of his career. He's played thousands and thousands of snaps. This is a veteran. This is the type of guy that the Raiders absolutely needed. And I'm happy that the Raiders are bringing in these type of players. Guys that can come in, play in a specific scheme and system, right? 6'1", 220 pounds, fits the Pete Carroll mold of players. This is a guy that's going to come in and potentially be a day one contributor for the Raiders, given where the safety position is kind of at this point. I was watching some of the tape from that Seahawks game, and you kind of get a feel for what the Raiders think the safety rotation should look like. It was very clear, Jeremy Chin, Thomas Harper, Isaiah Pola-Mao, very clear those were the top 3 safeties for the Raiders. And it's kind of interesting because Thomas Harper, at some point did not come back onto the football field. And Isaiah Pola-Mao was still kind of out there taking snaps. And maybe it's because they're trying to get him used to like playing as a free safety. That kind of makes sense to me. But it's kind of interesting because I would think those are the 3 safeties for the Raiders. But another guy that took a lot of snaps was Chris Smith. And we had heard that Chris Smith, after the Lonnie Johnson injury, was potentially a starter for the Raiders. And I watched this tape, man. It looks really, really, really bad. So many bad angles. Plays in which, he's looking right and then a guy just kind of runs past him. Not that it was necessarily a touchdown, but the football awareness, in my opinion, for Chris Smith just was not there, right? And that doesn't mean he cannot, doesn't mean he can't develop and still translate into a good football player. But watching guys like Chris Smith, guys like Trey Taylor, I was not impressed at all. And given the fact that Lonnie Johnson at some point was our 3rd safety, and obviously he's now out for an extended amount of time, I think the Raiders also kind of see what's in that safety room, and they've also decided we need to go out there and bring some more help in. So I'm not surprised that the Raiders are going out there and saying, Terrell Edmunds, we want you on this team right here. So the Raiders obviously are bringing the veteran in. They also waived wide receiver Seth Williams in a corresponding move. Interestingly, the Raiders went out there and got a different wide receiver today. They actually went out there and signed wide receiver Marquise Callaway, and they waived wide receiver Baker, and I don't even know who Baker is, to be honest with you guys. But they went out there and they brought in Marquise Callaway. Now, Callaway has been with the Raiders. I believe he was with us about 2 years ago. He was here for 7-8 weeks. Marquise Callaway, we'll see what he can kind of do for the Raiders. I like the signing. It does add a little bit of speed to the Raiders wide receivers. He's a guy who's 27, 28 years old, has been in the NFL for a number of years, has had good seasons in the past, right? In terms of he's not Justin Jefferson, but you can have a 3rd wide receiver, 4th wide receiver type of role, special teams, those type of things. So the Raiders have decided we need to bring in another wide receiver. Now, interestingly, there's another wide receiver that the Raiders have on this roster who looked really, really, really good. And I want to kind of spend some time talking a little bit about this guy. Shedrick Jackson, to me, absolutely flashed for the Raiders. This is nephew of Raider great Bo Jackson. Shedrick Jackson had 4 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. He actually also had a 5th catch as well, but he was called for a offensive pass interference. So the play ended up coming back. I didn't really think it was a pass interference. Truth be told, when you run these routes, if a guy's on top of you, you can create a little bit of separation using your hands. The great wide receivers do it all the time, but he got called for it. So the play ended up coming back, but 5 total catches, 90 yards, a touchdown, right? Given that pass interference play as well. To me, Jackson looked really, really good for the Raiders. And what's crazy about Jackson is of his 4 catches, 3 of them came with Cam Miller as his quarterback. But what's crazy about that is most of his snaps came with Aiden O'Connell. So, he played officially 23 snaps. I'd say probably 15 of those 23 snaps came with Aiden O'Connell as his quarterback. The rest of them came with, obviously, Cam Miller as his quarterback. But most of the production came with Cam Miller, which is kind of interesting. I almost think there's a chance that in practice, Shedrick Jackson's probably running with the 3rd or 4th string unit, which is probably where Cam Miller is also kind of running with. as opposed to Aiden O'Connell's probably running a lot more with like the ones, and then sometimes with the twos as well. And Cedric Jackson, Aiden O'Connell probably just didn't have that connection. But as soon as Cam Miller came in, man, this guy went absolutely on, ballistic. 41-yard touchdown on the sluggo route. Phenomenal play. I mean, you saw that safety fall for it. Or it may have been a corner. You see this guy just straight up fall for that route. He's gone, right? To me, Shedrick Jackson really, really, really flashed. And I wonder if Shedrick Jackson can actually make the roster for the Raiders. Now, I watched every single one of this guy's snaps. He doesn't have like blazing speed necessarily, but you can definitely tell this guy has, he has some good things in his tape. You can tell that this guy has a little bit of upside, a little bit of potential. And, he's definitely not a rookie, and you can kind of see that in his tape as well. From a route running perspective, he is definitely a little bit more fine-tuned than some of the other guys out there. I wonder if Shedrick Jackson can potentially make the roster over a guy like Marquise Callaway. I wonder if he can end up having that opportunity over a guy like Callaway, who the Raiders obviously went out there and also brought in. Also, another thing, just a side note to kind of keep in mind, the Raiders released 2 wide receivers over the past couple of days, right? Seth Williams and then Baker as well to bring in Marquise Callaway. 2 wide receivers released. Shedrick Jackson made the initial cut, which makes sense, right? He looked pretty good in that first preseason game. This is a guy to kind of keep an eye on as we kind of go forward. Now, obviously, the Raiders have 2 rookie wide receivers already. They have Trey Tucker. They have Jacoby Myers. So there's not a lot of room for guys to potentially win out a roster spot. But I'll be 100% honest with you guys. If you're asking me right now, Shedrick Jackson, Tommy Mellott, like which guys do you really want? Jackson looked a lot better, right? To me, Mellott did not even, I didn't even notice this guy out there. He took snaps, but like he was slow, wasn't, really that productive. Jackson actually looked really, really good out there. So a guy to kind of just keep an eye on as we go forward. 2 more things that I want to kind of get into. I want to first and foremost talk about this quarterback tier that is kind of trending a little bit on social media. It's kind of interesting because these are the type of things that get like a lot of the conversations going. A lot of people talk about this type of stuff, and it doesn't really matter given the fact that it's just a ranking at the end of the day. Every major news company can have their own rankings. The Athletic, ESPN, NFL Network. But Geno Smith in this ranking actually gets ranked fairly low in my opinion. He gets ranked as the 19th quarterback. He gets ranked as a tier 3 quarterback, right, based off the color. And, it's kind of interesting because they're putting him in the same bucket that they're putting Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Kirk Cousins. To me, like, I like Bryce Young. Don't get me wrong. I think he has the potential to be a top 10 quarterback still. But, like, Caleb Williams has not proven anything. Kirk Cousins is well past his prime. Even guys like, Aaron Rodgers or Tua Tagovailoa, like, to me, Geno Smith is a better quarterback than some of these guys, right? Aaron Rodgers is obviously up there in age, same with Kirk Cousins. But, like, to put Jared Goff in tier 2, I totally disagree with it. I don't think Jared Goff is any better than Geno Smith. I think they're basically the same type of quarterback. Jared Goff has been fortunate. He's been with Sean McVay. He's been with Ben Johnson. The guy's had 4 total coordinators, and anytime he's not with Sean McVay or Ben Johnson, he's lost. He's literally had like 17 games without those two coaches. He's 0-17 in those games. He has yet to win a football game without Ben Johnson, without Sean McVay. To me, if Geno Smith had Ben Johnson or Sean McVay, he's having success. He's making the playoffs. He's, potentially pushing for Super Bowls. It's kind of crazy to me how they come up with these tiers. And, no knock like on Jaden Daniels, for example, but it's kind of crazy to me how this happens every single year where, like 4 years, for example, Kyler Murray, who's ranked 15th, like 4 or 5 years ago, they said Kyler Murray's a top 5 quarterback. In these type of rankings, he's like the 5th, 6th best quarterback. And everybody's like, yeah, Kyler Murray's the next great quarterback. 2 years ago, CJ Stroud was up there as like a top 2 or 3 quarterback. People were literally saying like, it's Patrick Mahomes and then CJ Stroud, right? Like 2 years ago, literally, people were saying that. And now even CJ Stroud is tied for 9th, right? And now I feel like they're kind of doing the same thing with Jaden Daniels. Oh, he's the 6th best quarterback. We'll see. We'll see in 2 or 3 years what type of quarterback he is. And then even then, Jalen Hurts, I feel like is severely disrespected. I know he has a great team, he has a great general manager and all that, but at the end of the day, he gets out there and he wins those games. We know there's quarterbacks out there that just aren't clutch. We've seen Dak Prescott, for example, have the #1 rated defense, come in and throw multiple interceptions, just suck it up in the playoffs. We've seen quarterbacks, even more so than that, Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert's straight garbage in clutch situations where he has to kind of win those big games. It's just crazy to me, right? The disrespect that Geno Smith is getting. But I hope this year he comes out there and he really proves that he's a top 10 to 12 quarterback. And we'll see what this list kind of looks like as we go forward. And then I want to wrap this video up and I want to talk a little bit about one of the Las Vegas Raiders young guards, because a lot of people have been talking about him and they've kind of been putting him in a negative category, right? Like he's like a terrible offensive lineman. And I don't think I necessarily said he's a terrible offensive lineman, so I don't think I am pushing propaganda or anything like that. But there's a lot of articles that I've seen, like Raiders, reporters and those type of things, where these guys are saying that the Raiders rookie guard Caleb Rogers looked really, really, really bad. And, I went out and I watched his tape, watched every single one of his snaps. The guy played a lot of snaps in this first game. I didn't feel like he was all that bad, truth be told, given it was his very first ever NFL action. Sure, on the very first play that he ever came in, he blew a block, and that linebacker blew up Ashton Jeanty in the backfield. But outside of that one play, and then he had one other bad play in which Aiden Collins took a big hit. Outside of those two plays, I didn't think Caleb Rogers was absolutely awful. And this is me, spending time earlier today going through every single one of his snaps. I didn't think he was that awful. Obviously I don't think he's ready necessarily to be a day one starter, right? He's not one of those guys that's a plug and play. He's ready to go. But I also didn't think he was so poor that you can say he's, considered a bad football player. In fact, there was an article that did like winners and losers, and they put Caleb Rogers in the losers category. I find that hard to believe that this guy's a loser. I feel like he had some good moments. He had some bad moments, of course. But, generally speaking, if Caleb Rogers is in there, and next to him is Colt Miller and Jackson Powers-Johnson, it's a lot different than when Thayer Munford or Charles Grant are to his left, and then, Jared Hufford's his center or some other guy, right? It does make a difference if that's the case. So, again, I think Caleb Rogers definitely looked okay out there. He wasn't terrible. He had some really good reps. He had some mistakes that he can kind of get better from, but then I just want to kind of put it out there that I feel like Caleb Rogers is definitely better than what people are saying, because some people are saying he's awful. I don't think that's the case. I wouldn't be surprised if Caleb Rogers by week 5 is starting for the Raiders. I would not be surprised if that happens. And, always remember, not every player out there is an all-pro caliber player. Some guys got to develop a little bit. And then you also got to realize, at some point, Andre James, he was getting better, but then he hits that peak. Is that peak good enough? Because if it's not, then you got to replace it, right? Caleb Rogers' peak is probably a lot higher than where Alex Kappa kind of peaked out at, right? Now, will Caleb Rogers actually hit that point? That's to be determined. But I wouldn't be surprised if at some point he takes over at the guard position, right? Or if Jordan Meredith, he'll peak out at some point. We don't really know where that's at yet. Wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders made that change as well, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. I didn't think Caleb Rogers was as awful as people were kind of saying. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What do you guys think about Rogers? What do you guys think about bringing in Terrell Edmunds, about Shedrick Jackson? What are your guys' thoughts on the disrespect that Geno Smith's getting? 19th best quarterback. Let me know what you guys think about that. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.